Let's start with the creatures that only haunted your nightmares, and slowly work our way towards the ones that were literally supposed to end the world. Today, if you hear something outside at night, you can grab a flashlight, check your security camera, or Google weird animal noises at 3 a.m. For most of human history, people didn't have that. They had darkness, bad weather, missing people, and a very active imagination. So they filled the forests, rivers, and oceans with monsters. Some were cautionary tales. Some were walking metaphors for guilt, grief, and hunger. And some were just there to make sure no one slept well ever again. In this video, we're going to count down 8 of the most terrifying mythical creatures people once genuinely believed in. They weren't just characters in stories. They were explanations for why bad things kept happening in the dark. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll see how some people truly thought the end of the world would arrive, riding on the backs of monsters big enough to bite the sky. Number 8. The Banshee, the woman who screams death. If you lived in old Ireland, the worst sound you could hear at night wasn't thunder. It was a woman crying your family's name outside the house. The Banshee isn't a monster that hunts you down. She doesn't tear you apart or drag you away. She does something arguably worse. She lets you know you're on the schedule. According to Irish and Scottish folklore, some old families had their own banshee, a ghostly woman bound to them. On the night before a death in the family, she would appear nearby and begin to wail. Picture a windswept hillside, rain coming in sideways, and an old stone cottage with a fire barely holding the dark back. Everyone inside is trying to sleep. Then, somewhere out in the night, a sound begins. It's not just crying. It's a kind of broken, rising howl like grief, given a voice and turned up as loud as it will go. Someone sits up in bed. Grandmother makes the sign of the cross. Nobody wants to look out the window. Eventually, one of the younger men gets brave, or stupid, and cracks the door open. For a moment, he doesn't see anything. Just rain, fog, and the crooked shapes of hawthorn trees. Then he spots her, sitting on a low wall by the lane. Her hair is long and tangled, whipping in the wind. She's wearing a gray or white gown that clings to her like wet paper. Her face is pale and strained, eyes red from endless crying. She turns her head slowly, like she already knows he's there, and screams again. It feels like her voice rips straight through his chest. In the morning, word arrives from town. A cousin has died in the night, or an uncle's fishing boat never came back, or someone who seemed perfectly healthy yesterday just dropped without warning. Coincidence? To the people living that story, absolutely not. The Banshee became a way to make sense of sudden death. Terrifying, yes, but at least it meant somebody knew it was coming. In Ireland, if you heard a Banshee at night, you didn't need a doctor. You needed a will. Number 7. Black Shuck, the hellhound on the road. Now imagine this. It's medieval England. You're walking home along a lonely coastal road at night, and you realize you're not walking alone. Legends tell of a gigantic black dog that prowls the countryside and shorelines of East Anglia. They call him Black Shuck, from an old word for devil. He's not your average stray. Witnesses say he's as big as a calf, with shaggy black fur and eyes that glow red or yellow in the dark. Sometimes he has one eye, right in the center of his forehead. Sometimes he doesn't leave footprints at all. What he does leave behind is problems. Seeing Black Shuck is supposed to mean disaster, bad luck, a death in the family, or your own, sooner than you'd like. Picture a traveler centuries ago, cloak pulled tight against the wind, trudging along a dirt lane between hedges. He hears it first, the soft, steady rhythm of paws on the road behind him. At first, he thinks it's a farm dog. Then he realizes the footsteps are matching his pace exactly. He speeds up. They speed up. He slows down. They slow down. When he finally forces himself to look over his shoulder, he sees it. A dog, huge and black, walking just at the edge of his lantern light. Its eyes glow like two coals. Its mouth hangs open just enough to show teeth. It doesn't growl. It doesn't bark. It doesn't attack. It just walks beside him, watching. When he reaches a crossroads, the dog stops. It stares for a heartbeat longer, then vanishes into the hedgerow as if it had never been there. The traveler gets home shaking. Everyone tells him the same thing. This is very bad. Within months, maybe he falls ill. Maybe lightning hits the barn. Maybe someone close to him dies in an accident. To modern ears, Black Shuck sounds like a spooky campfire story, maybe inspired by real dogs seen in fog and moonlight. To people who had to walk those roads on foot, with no lights and no guarantee they'd ever reach the next village, a hellhound pacing you in the dark felt completely plausible. Black Shuck didn't have to chase you. He just had to walk beside you. And let statistics do the rest. Number 6. Kappa, the river kidnapper. If you were a child in old Japan, there was one clear rule about rivers and ponds: don't get too close, or the green boy in the water will take you. The kappa is a creature from Japanese folklore that looks like someone tried to design a person, a turtle, and a frog at the same time. He's usually described as child-sized, with green or blue skin, webbed hands and feet, a turtle shell on his back, and a beak-like mouth. On top of his head is a shallow depression filled with water, his life force. As long as that water stays in place, he's strong. If it spills, he loses his power. Kappa live in rivers, lakes, and ponds. And according to legend, they love 3 things: cucumbers, sumo wrestling, and pulling people, especially kids and animals, into the water to drown. Picture a humid summer afternoon in a rural village centuries ago. Children run down to the river to play. Parents shout warnings from the fields. One boy ignores them. He wades in a little deeper, splashing, feeling the cool current around his legs. Suddenly, a pale hand breaks the surface and grabs his ankle. He stumbles, looks down, and sees a face staring up at him from the water. Big round eyes, a beak where the mouth should be, hair clinging to a wet, bowl-shaped dent in the skull. The creature grins and pulls. The boy screams. Other kids run. By the time adults arrive, there's nothing left but ripples and a dropped sandal. Stories like this traveled quickly. Were real drownings caused by slippery rocks, strong currents, and kids misjudging depth? Almost certainly. Did it help to tell those kids there was a polite but extremely dangerous turtle demon waiting to drag them under? Also yes. Because here's the twist. Kappa are deadly, but they're also obsessed with manners. If you bow deeply to a kappa, he is honor-bound to bow back. When he does, the water in the dish on his head spills out, and he loses his strength. You can then fill it again and command him to leave you alone. Parents in old Japan didn't need no swimming signs. They had a courteous, child-drowning river monster for that. Number 5. La Llorona, the weeping woman by the river. Some myths start as ghost stories. This one starts as a tragedy. Across Mexico and much of Latin America, people tell the story of La Llorona, the weeping woman. The details vary, but the core is always heartbreak. A beautiful woman falls in love with a man, often wealthy or of higher status. They have children. Eventually, he abandons her for someone else. In a moment of rage and despair, she takes the children to a river and drowns them. As soon as she realizes what she's done, the shock and guilt are too much. She dies, sometimes by her own hand, sometimes from grief, and her spirit is cursed to wander forever, searching for her lost children. Now she appears near rivers, lakes, and canals on dark nights, dressed in white, hair hanging down, face hidden. People hear her before they see her, a distant sobbing, a woman's voice wailing, "Mi hijos, my children," over and over, carried on the wind. If you follow the sound, you might glimpse her standing by the water's edge, swaying gently, shoulders shaking. She may look almost normal from far away, until she turns. Her eyes are empty, or bleeding, or not there at all. Her mouth stretches too wide in a scream. Her skin is the color of something that's been underwater too long. Some versions say she lures children toward her, mistaking them for her own, and pulls them into the river. Others say just hearing her cry is bad luck. Either way, she is not someone you want to meet on your walk home. La Llorona became more than a ghost. She was a warning about jealousy, rage, and what happens when adults fail their children. She was also a very effective way to keep kids from sneaking down to the water at night. La Llorona is the only babysitter who makes kids stay inside without ever saying a word to them. Number 4. Jinn and ghouls, the desert shapeshifters. In the scorching deserts and lonely graveyards of Middle Eastern folklore, danger doesn't just come from heat and thirst. It comes from things that live just one step sideways from the human world. In Islamic tradition, jinn are beings made of smokeless fire. They have free will like humans, so some are kind, some neutral, and some very, very bad news. Among the worst are ghouls. Ghouls haunt cemeteries, ruins, and remote places. They can change shape often into animals or humans to trick travelers. They're associated with eating corpses, attacking lone wanderers, and generally making sure no one relaxes in the desert. Imagine a caravan moving across a vast stretch of sand under a sky full of stars. One man falls behind, tired and thirsty. The others disappear over the next dune. Just as panic sets in, he sees a light flickering ahead. He approaches and finds a small campfire and a figure sitting beside it, a young woman with a veiled face, or an old man with kind eyes, or maybe a fellow traveler in familiar clothes. They offer him food, water, a place to rest. He sits, grateful, and the conversation drifts. Something feels off. Maybe their shadow points in the wrong direction. Maybe their feet don't quite touch the sand. In some stories, he realizes too late that the meal was never meant for him. It was meant to be him. In others, the ghoul leads him deeper into the desert with promises of a shortcut until he collapses and never gets up again. These tales weren't just spooky entertainment. They were survival guides disguised as horror. Don't wander alone. Don't trust strangers who appear out of nowhere in hostile terrain. And remember that death waits in beautiful illusions, like the mirage of an oasis that vanishes when you reach it. If a stranger appears out of nowhere in the middle of the desert, congratulations. You've either found a miracle or tomorrow's missing person report. Number 3. The manananggal, the night splitter. Some monsters sneak in through the door. This one leaves half her body at home and flies in through the roof. In Filipino folklore, the aswang is a broad category of shape-shifting, human-eating creatures. One of the most disturbing variations is the manananggal. By day, she may look like an ordinary woman. By night, things get weird. When darkness falls and she's ready to hunt, the manananggal reportedly detaches her upper body from her lower half. Her torso sprouts bat-like wings. Her arms lengthen. Organs trail behind her like ropes. She leaves her motionless lower body standing in a hidden place, often a banana grove or behind a house. Then the flying half takes off into the night, searching for prey. Her favorite targets? Sleeping people, especially pregnant women. In many stories, she lands silently on the roof, crawling slowly toward where her victim lies below. Then she extends an impossibly long, thin tongue, more like a proboscis than anything human, down through cracks in the ceiling or the open window. That tongue slips into the victim's mouth, or belly, or chest, and begins to feed without waking them. By the time morning comes, the person is weak, ill, or dead. The only way to stop her, folk wisdom says, is to find the abandoned lower half and smear salt, garlic, or ash on the exposed torso. When the upper half tries to return before sunrise, she can't reattach. Sunlight does the rest. It's horrifying. It's also a story born in a world where pregnancy complications, sudden nocturnal illness, and unexplained deaths were common and terrifying. Better to blame a flying night demon than live with the idea that sometimes bad things just happen for no visible reason. The manananggal is proof that in some places, even getting out of bed at night is a terrible life choice. Number 2. The wendigo, the hunger that walks. If cold, isolation, and starvation had a mascot, it would be this thing. Among several Algonquian-speaking peoples of North America, the wendigo is a spirit or creature that embodies insatiable greed and cannibalism. Descriptions vary, but the wendigo is usually tall and gaunt, with skin stretched tight over its bones, eyes sunken deep in its skull, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Sometimes it has antlers or a deer-like head. Sometimes it looks disturbingly human. No matter the version, it is always hungry. Legend says a person who resorts to eating human flesh in desperation during a harsh winter, for example, might become a wendigo. Once transformed, they can never be satisfied. The more they eat, the hungrier they get. Now imagine a small hunting camp in the far north, centuries ago. Snow piles up against the cabin walls. The wind screams through the trees. Game is scarce, supplies are low, nights are long, and stories are all that stand between the people inside and the feeling that the dark is pressing in. One of those stories is about the wendigo. The elders describe eerie cries carried on the wind, like someone calling your name from the forest. They talk about footprints that start out human and gradually turn into something else. About people who venture out alone and come back, wrong. In real life, starvation and isolation can do terrible things to the mind. Hallucinations, paranoia, desperate thoughts. The Wendigo legend captures all of that in one terrifying image. The idea that under enough stress, a human being can become a monster to the people they once loved. It also works beautifully as a moral warning. Don't eat your friends. Don't let greed rule you. Don't take more than you need when others are starving. The Wendigo was basically the original do not eat people public service announcement, just with extra antlers. Number 1. Fenrir and Jormungandr, the World Enders. Most monsters haunt one village, one forest, one unlucky group of travelers. The last creatures on our list were built to destroy gods. In Norse mythology, the trickster god Loki has 3 particularly alarming children. Hel, who ends up ruling the underworld, Jormungandr, the world's serpent, and Fenrir, the giant wolf. The gods of Asgard look at these kids and, to their credit, immediately go, yeah, these are a problem. Jormungandr is thrown into the ocean that encircles the human world, Midgard. There he grows and grows, until his body is so long it wraps all the way around the earth and he can bite his own tail. The sea serpent is now an extremely angry belt. Fenrir, the wolf, is raised among the gods at first. He grows quickly, becoming enormous and terrifying. Only the war god Tyr is brave enough to feed him. Prophecy says that when the end times Ragnarok come, Fenrir will break free, his jaws large enough to swallow the sky, and kill Odin, chief of the gods. Naturally, the gods decide to restrain him. They bring out chains, heavier and heavier each time, pretending it's a game of strength. Fenrir breaks them all. Finally, they get the dwarves, the best craftsmen in the universe, to forge something special. Gleipnir? A ribbon-thin, magical binding made from impossible things, like the sound of a cat's footsteps and the roots of a mountain. The gods tell Fenrir it's just another test. Fenrir eyes the delicate ribbon and senses a trap. He agrees to be bound only if one of the gods puts a hand in his mouth as a sign of good faith. Tyr volunteers. They wrap Fenrir. He strains, and this time, he cannot break free. Realizing he's been tricked, he bites down, severing Tyr's hand. The gods fasten the chain to a massive rock and drive a sword into Fenrir's jaws to hold them open. He howls in rage, drool forming a river, and waits. Meanwhile, far below the waves, Jormungandr lies coiled around the world. His every movement stirs the seas. When he finally releases his tail, it will be the signal that Ragnarok has begun. At the end of days, the myths say, the sky will split, the earth will shake. Fenrir will break his chains and rampage across the world, devouring everything in his path. Jormungandr will rise from the ocean, poisoning the sky and land. Gods and monsters will kill each other. Odin and Fenrir, Thor and Jormungandr. The world will burn, sink, and then, maybe, be born again. For people living in the harsh landscapes of Scandinavia, battered by storms, volcanoes, long winters, and short summers, the idea that the world could end in chaos wasn't a crazy thought experiment. It was Tuesday's weather forecast. Fenrir and Jormungandr are that fear turned into characters. A wolf big enough to eat a god, and a snake using the planet as a stress toy. When your culture's bedtime story involves a wolf eating your chief deity and a serpent long enough to tie a bow around the earth, you're not exactly aiming for comforting. From lonely banshees on rain-swept hillsides, to hellhounds pacing country roads, from turtle demons in the river and grieving ghosts by the water, to shapeshifters in the desert, flying torso vampires over palm roofs, walking hunger in the winter woods, and monsters big enough to drag the world into the sea. People have always filled the dark with things that stare back. These creatures weren't just jump scares. They were ways of talking about death that arrives without warning, the danger of deep water and wild places, guilt and grief that never leave, greed that eats everything around it, and the feeling that we live on a fragile world that could crack at any moment. Today, we've swapped campfire tales for horror movies, creepypasta, and urban legends. Our monsters live in screens and stories instead of in the woods outside town. But the fears behind them, those are very old. So, Which of these creatures would you least want to meet alone at night? And do you think modern horror monsters are actually scarier? Or are we just rebranding the same old fears with better special effects?